let's get started.
Whoosh.
I'm going to do like I did last week. I'm going to do like a roundup of topics we plan to talk about, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're actually going to talk about them. Uh, we're going to try and address a response, a reply I got from Thomas Frank on Twitter about you can either get a lot of attention or impress people who regularly read academic papers. You have to choose one. We're going to discuss that. And we're also going to discuss business, but YouTube business, and potentially how that moves forwards. And I can see this relating to educational creators for technology and how that impacts potentially the micro influencers around productivity tools, apps, etc., etc. So, John, where do you want to start?
Oh, I want to start with everything all at once, all of the time, because honestly, that sounds like fun.
Unfortunately, time doesn't work like that.
I know. Well, at least our construction of time, maybe it does. We just do not know. But yeah, we can start with
Let's
Thomas
not
Frank.
go into the quantum realm yet. We're only like a minute into the episode.
All right, fair enough. It felt like the quantum realm this week. So let's start with the easy bit.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Start off nice and easy, and then ramp up to ecological dynamics and quantum theories with time. Oh, that was a conversation yesterday, but yeah.
Oh, come on. You can't.
Oh, yeah, no. It was something what we were talking about beforehand about. Okay. So long story short, I went out yesterday for like a party do celebrating a friend's birthday. He's 30. He's getting old. I say that, but like everyone listening could be like 30 plus. I'm 26 for reference. So yeah, he's 4 years older. And
I honestly forget you're 26 sometimes.
I'm 27 at the end of the year.
I honestly forget.
Yeah. Well, I sound younger, don't I?
No. Well, you sound younger and act older.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's obviously the way I look as well. I don't look old. That's why I have a facial hair. Otherwise, I look like I'm like 16, 18.
This is the same.
Yeah. I look like a teenager, and people like I used to get ID'd a lot, and I'm like, I have an undergraduate degree. Please stop it. But yeah. Anyway, really like side tangent of a side tangent there. So yeah, at this party, there were some people from work, the guy's work, which is the university that I went to. And I hadn't spoken to the lecturers for a while, and they were asking, "Oh, what's going on?" And somehow they knew I was doing stuff. Like they knew what I was doing somehow. And anyway, obviously someone told someone, and then it just flew through the university staff. But yeah, so they were asking me questions about what's going on, what's happening, etc. And we got on the conversation of ecological dynamics, and yeah,
as you do.
Yeah, I mean lecturers, and yeah, I was told that by one of my lecturers in my master's degree, he was the head of the course. He said he sees me in like 10, 15 years being like an old man, like well, not 10, 15, like later on in life, like an old man sitting in a chair with like loads of books behind me, smoking a pipe with a whiteboard, chalkboard, sort of scientist vibe. And I'm running this big like movement of a way of thinking or a way of doing something. Like that's what he sees me doing. I'm like, a couple of problems there. One, I don't actually read physical books. Two, I don't smoke a pipe or smoke at all. And three, I would never have long curly hair because like looking at my dad, I think I'm going to lose my hair if anything. But yeah,
So less kind of like warmly lovely professor with a pipe and someone who you look at more kind of mad, crazy scientist then, would you say?
yeah, that's
That's why
what
I imagine more crazed scientist. We're just gonna sit there going, you kids and your cognitive theory.
exactly that's exactly it. But yeah,
So basically what we already do.
Yeah, just I would be much older.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were talking about different elements of ecological dynamics and theories and how to apply it. And yeah, it sort of went through, and I got asked some obvious questions from the academics of how does this work? How can you apply this? How do you measure this? Of course, is a question. And longer story short, we got into how time impacts the way that dynamical systems affect how we learn, the environments we're built in, etc. So Schrodinger's cat sort of thing, it's alive until you open the box and then it's dead or not dead. For those unfamiliar, just Google or Bing Schrodinger's cat and you'll find out. But it's kind of a
I love how
paradox.
you've added Bing in there right now.
Well,
It's
yeah,
like
because
Google Bing.
yeah, I prefer to Bing it. But yeah, so we were talking about that and how the
What about
time.
DuckDuckGo it?
No, just no.
Sorry, that was helpful.
But yeah, the time and the quantum levels of time and the paradoxes of time impact how you could tangibly measure ecological dynamics, and that's the direction of the conversation that it went. I mean, this is while music's going on in the background. You've got like 5-year-old kids running around with balloons, like.
Maybe I'm along the same kind of wavelength. Who the fuck knows? Because I do not have professors around me who are actually interested in that sort of shit, or professors around me at all. But oh well.
The professors I'm talking to and the lecturers I'm talking to have no real concept of the research I'm talking about. It's related. So they're either professors in anatomy and physiology, psychology, skill acquisition, motor movements, those sorts of things, or in elements of cognitive psychology through neuroscience and pedagogy. One of them was a psychology lecturer, but that was more social science and like Myers-Briggs, characteristics, archetypes, those sorts of things. So even though they're lecturers and they're academics, they're not ecological dynamic academics. So
fun.
Yeah.
But
it was more of a talking. It was more of a talking to people that could be critical rather than talking to people that knew the field, but it's still beneficial.
Yeah. But one of the things that I've been thinking of, like, and I don't know whether this relates, because obviously who the fuck knows anymore. But I was thinking about time, because time is the one constraint at the moment that we always have. Which was like, oh, that's interesting. Because obviously time is a big constraint of mine right now. Like in the environment that I'm in, since shifting, as we discussed in last week's episode, of like what's going on in my life, time is like the biggest constraint, which is the first time just the first time where it has become so prevalent in my system, when it has emerged right at the front, whereas before it was always it was always there, and time is always there, but it was never kind of like that influential.
So
oh, I can't wait. I knew this was coming. I was like, I'm going to say this and this is going to spark one heck of a conversation. Let's go.
This is one of those things where people say something, and I've actually thought about this for like months. And this side comment, like I'm going to pin this up for a second. I'm writing a book in the background of all the stuff that I'm doing, and I'm trying to write it. I have no idea when this is going to be out, by the way. It's not like
how do you do? Like in all, I mean, I suppose
that's another question.
Thinking about it, I was about to say, how do you do that? And I'm like, you don't have kids, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, but yeah. So I'm writing a book and building out all these ideas together. So when people say this sort of stuff, I'm like, I've thought this through. I have examples for this. I have a way to explain this. And the way I would look at time is I don't see it as a constraint, but I don't see it as an affordance either.
Oh.
Right? It could be one or the other, depending on the interpretation you have on how time impacts the environment.
Is it a part of the environment itself, would you say, or the environment itself?
The way I'm currently theorizing this is time is the canvas the environment is built on.
Oh.
Right?
Because that's a fucking tiny environment right now for me.
Well, no, it's massive. That's the thing. Because when you look at the canvas, time is massive. It is infinite, essentially, when you look at time. Infinite within reason, obviously, because each person will have a limited amount of time to be used. But when you look at the potential opportunities you have with time, next minute I could be doing lots of different things. It's not until the time has happened that it reduces the opportunities, basically. So you sort of have I see it as like a tunnel moving forwards. Like you always have a light going forwards, and you can go in any of those directions. If you move slightly to the right, the cone of light moves slightly to the right, and you can sort of follow. And that's the canvas. It's just a flat canvas, and the environment that you're in is that light going forwards where you're moving, depending on the decision you
And so the
make.
time is it's yeah. Oh,
So
that's cool.
the time is the floor that you're standing on, and the environment is the light that you're shining your focus, attention, whatever word you want to replace there, into. So you're like driving a car along just a completely flat surface, and the headlights is the environment that you're creating, and inside the environment is all the bits, all the parts of the system, and then you would organize the system. But that's how I would view time. Time is the surface. It's the canvas that you're building these environments on between the interaction of the organism, the person, and
And
the
then
environment.
time in obviously is interacting with the environment versus time being part of the environment.
Well,
I mean, it is part of the environment,
is
but it's
time
not.
is both.
Yeah.
It's both. It's part of the environment, but it's built on the environment, in the environment, and it can be a constraint or an affordance depending on. I mean, I guess using the analogy, is it a bump in that flat surface to create a constraint, or is it a hole where it allows more? It could be one or the
Oh,
other. Yeah,
yeah.
it could be one or the other. And I think the perception, I mean, when you look at visual illusions, just using this analogy again, you can use visual illusions as be like, oh, okay, that's so when you see the faces, it looks like it's coming out at you when actually it's like in depth, but it's the way your eyes are perceiving that information. And that's the way I see time. Time could be throwing out in front of you, could be a constraint, or it could be going backwards as an affordance, but you won't know until you take a different perspective, i.e. you move slightly to the left and you can see that it's going in or not. And that's where you'd readdress whatever it is that you're thinking about, and how you would see the world. So taking a different perspective, because a lot of people just go down that one view.
Yeah.
And it's not until you really step back and challenge what you're looking at that you can see it. Yes, you can see kids that say time constraint, but it's also an affordance, because if you look at what you're doing with your kids, you have the opportunities and the environments to learn things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do. Like,
Yeah.
I can't apply a lot of the things that I would want to learn or question or find out because I don't have kids. Like, I can't put them in a situation and see what they do. You can see how they interact with tech, how they interact with school, how they interact at that age with their knowledge, and you can learn from them. I can't do that. So to me, having kids could be an advantage inside this field. Same with writers. But obviously it can also be a negative, depending on, again, the perspective you take on it. So that's the way I think about it.
I love that. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really, I like that. And I had an example of this with the current trajectory. Like, I've been having some bloody cash flow issues. There's so many things going on at home that I'm trying to navigate. So there's been some cash flow issues in the business. And a good example of this was a perspective shift I did literally the other day, where it was like, I could choose to literally just go, well, this is crap, the business is over, everything is done, and I just should just give up and forget everything. That was kind of like, I don't have enough time to run a business. And then I shifted the perspective by gathering more information, by getting more information, and something that I am going to be doing to help me in like the environment of my business is to have more of those feedback loops, those where I kind of gather the information far more than I have been. And also to look at more of the feedback loops that I have and bring them more into the forefront so that I can see them in the environment that I have with the limited time I have. So that's pretty cool. And I do like, so that was one example, I think, of that exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting you say limited time. Like
Yes.
that's just interesting to me. A lot of people, like myself included, we look at the negative first. Obviously, negativity bias or the cognitive biases, blah blah blah. But when you actually look at it, why is it limited time?
I don't
Why
have a good answer.
limited? Sorry?
Because it wasn't as much, it's a comparison.
Yeah.
It is a comparison to what I had before. And I'm almost emotionally mourning the loss of what I had before.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is processing through that and I suppose recalibrating my system to and the environment that I'm in to see what falls in place.
Yeah, so maybe this is it. Maybe this is like, oh, that's how I do so much. Because I get asked all the time, how do I manage to do so much? Because I do seem to do a lot from the outside, but
You
I don't
do.
see me as doing that much. I'm like, I could be doing so many things, so many other things, and I like when I'm looking at my calendar, I see spaces to do work.
Mm.
I don't see I don't have enough time there. I just see spaces I could do work.
Mm.
So I don't see that I'm limited in time. I mean, I could say I only have 1 hour to do my newsletter later, or I only have half an hour to research an element for the course. But I don't like in my head. I didn't even think about that. Which is why when you said I have limited time, I'm like, that's not even a concept in my vocabulary at the moment.
Fascinating. What do you think that? Why?
Again, I think this comes down to the conversation we were having a couple of weeks ago about the interpretation of the language that we speak.
Mm.
It's just not natural to me now to say that. I know I used to before, but I don't. It's just not in my vocabulary. I just don't want to. It's just not the word that I would pick. It's not the it's not the way that I would phrase that. Which is why
Mm.
when I hear you say that, I'm like, why? I don't get it. Right? Yes, I'm restricted and limited on time when I go to London, but I don't see that. Like the first thing that comes to my head, or the first thing that came to my head when I knew I had to go to London, bearing in mind, for context, this is about 2.5 hour journey for me, right? So I have to leave home, get to the train station. So I'm driving. Then I get on the train to go to London. And then when I'm at London, that's after about an hour and a bit train journey, depending on obviously delays and stuff. UK at the moment with trains is a pain in the bum. And then sort of like walk to tube, get on tube, get off tube. And I can't do work on the tube, but I can still listen to something. So in my head, I'm like, in the car, I can listen to music, which is freeing. On the train, I can do written work. I get to do the written work and I can look at this and I can look at that. And I have a list of things I can do on the train. Then on the tube, I have like 70 podcasts I can listen to on the tube. And then when I'm walking up to work, I then listen to music again to sort of consolidate to some extent. Won't go too much into like my thinking behind it, but it's music to essentially
Oh, come on!
recover.
Don't. No, 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 no! Don't say I don't want to go too much into that. This is
Well,
this
we haven't
podcast.
spoken about either of the topics we were going to talk about.
Yes, this is way more interesting. Quite frankly, sorry guys.
Okay.
No, I actually think this is really helpful because one, it's helpful for me, and I am pretty sure it's helpful for a lot of the people listening because I'm like, oh, that's a very you're talking about how to do the things, which is not what people talk about in the productivity space. They talk about the how to do's and the what to do's and the how to prepare to do it, but they don't talk about the doing.
Right.
And this is you doing the doing,
Yes.
obviously. You do
Doing the doing. Yes.
exactly professional language here. So
Yeah.
this is really interesting. Go for it. I'd love to
Okay.
hear it.
Yeah. So when okay, I'll finish off how I get to work,
Yeah.
and then I'll go back to why I made the decisions that I did. So yeah. So then I'm doing the journey, the walk, depending on like which route I take, it's about 10 minutes. And then I get in and then I get to start the work of the day, which again, I've already planned out. And then it's the reverse when I go home. So I listen to music. I'm then on the tube listening to a podcast or still music, depending on, again, decisions that I've made, which I'll explain in a minute. Then I get on the train and then I'm now in focused work. Yeah. And I would then focus on whatever I wanted to do then. I get home and I still want to work, but I know I need to go to bed. So what I'll do is I'll then do lighter work, sort of the small bits that I can round off or close some loops on, go to bed, wake up, and then it's just a repeat. And I'm just like, okay, what like next up. And it's just this conveyor belt of things I get to do rather than me going, I have a limited slot over there. I can only do so much over here. Like those words just don't, it's just not in my head. It just feels unnatural to say, I only have an hour to do this. So the decisions as to when I listen to music, when I listen to a podcast, what I listen to is I'm going to use ecological words here because, again, it's just so much easier the way that I explain it. So I apologize for those that are like, I don't get it. I'm so confused. I am trying to make content to explain this stuff.
I will also try to explain my interpretations because often I'm pretty good at interpreting what you say. So I'm happy to interpret and ask questions. And
yeah, do probe.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, so I wake up in the morning and in my head, the first thing I want to do is whatever it is that either I was thinking about while I was going to bed, or whatever it is that's interesting me as I wake up. Yeah.
First question, sorry. Do you, because this is a common thing that happens, write it down before you go to bed? Do you write down what you think about before you go to bed? Or is it just what emerges from the beginning?
So
And if you do both, how do you decide that?
The way that this goes against a lot of the advice.
And that's why I asked, because I knew it would.
Yeah. Like I have my phone next to me, like in bed. Well, not like in the bed, but yeah, it's on my desk, which is like I can just reach out in the dark, but like, yeah, there it is. It's all the way dimmed down, so there's like lights aren't blinding me. But when I lay down, my brain doesn't stop most of the time. Like maybe one day a month, I'll actually lay down and go to bed. And that's because like I've done so much work throughout the last like 2 or 3 weeks. And my brain's just like, you know what? Just go to bed. That's like once a month, maybe. Most of the time though. Yeah.
I didn't ask this context. So when you say go to bed, what time is that for you?
What time was it for me? Normally around 1 o'clock in the morning because I'm a night owl, but that's only because that's when typically I would just not finish, but I would be happy with the work that I'd done in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm happy with where I'm at. I know what I need to do next. I know where I'm going to go. So I'm going to stop here. Like, it's like I'm at the checkpoint or the whatever in the game.
At the save station in a Final Fantasy game. You've just gone and saved. You saved your game, file saved, ready to go when you're ready to load it up again. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And previously, before this job in London, that was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes 2, sometimes 12. It depended on what I was doing and where my brain was at. The way I saw it is I didn't want to stop myself from working while my brain is going for 2 reasons. 1, it prevents the actual work that I was getting done. And 2, I ain't falling asleep with my brain going 100 miles an hour. That's just not happening. So I'm better off finishing off the work in the next half hour, 40 minutes, then trying to go to sleep, than trying to go to sleep with this stuff going around in my head, just tossing and turning for an hour. It's like, either way, I'm not sleeping in that first half an hour, 40 minutes. So I might as well do the work and then go to bed. So yeah, that's before the job. Now with the job, I shifted my sleep schedule 3 hours, which some people will be like, oh my God, that must have been so hard. It took me 2 days. I'll go to bed earlier. So now exactly the same principle, exactly the same rules. I say rules, guidelines. It's just the way that my body works because of the environment that it's in. So when I come home, obviously I have my dinner, watch TV downstairs with family, come upstairs, and I choose not to turn the computers on, because if I turn the computers on, that's me starting something. And I don't want to start something new because I'm going to bed. So what I do is I round up all the things that's already happened during the day. So that's where I'm closing all the loops. And most of that is done on my phone because it's on my phone or on the laptop. So that's finishing up whatever I was writing, whatever I was researching, closing down some of the tabs that are no longer necessary, or adding notes in my Morgan on my phone or on the laptop for tomorrow's stuff. So it's rounding out the day and telling me what to do the next day. When I'm in bed, I have my phone next to me. I lay there, and it's not meditation, but it could be. So this is going to get like really specific. I'm a side sleeper. I sleep on my side, right? But I lay on my back deliberately. I know I can't fall asleep on my back, but I lay on my back deliberately to let my body relax and just chill. Like, okay, we're going to bed now. Time to do not things. Like, and in that process, my brain goes in all different directions. Most of the time, it's useless. Most of the time, it goes in stupid directions. That was pointless. And then I will try and, well, the way I think about it is I think about something specifically and focus on that one thing and don't let my brain go elsewhere. But if my brain keeps pushing me in that direction, I follow it. I don't try and fight it. Kind of like I don't have like tics. That people that do have tics that need to do the thing, it's kind of like that. Like I don't want to fight against it. It's just the way my body's going. So I'll follow that thought.
Mm-hmm.
And if I think about it and I'm like, that's really cool, I'll then just sit up, type it on my phone, lay back down. And because it's on my phone, I don't need to think about it because I have to think about it tomorrow. So that's gone. And then I go through the process again of just thinking about one thing specific. Sometimes it's just thinking about black. Sometimes it's a candle. Sometimes it's a room. Sometimes it's a topic, a thing, a person, an object. Focus on whatever's in my head, and that's it. And then if something else bugs me again and picks up, I sit back up, I type on my phone, and I lay back down again. Mm-hmm. In the morning, when I wake up, I know, because I remember when I wake up that I typed stuff down. So I'm like, what did I type down? Sometimes I'll wake up and there'll be things like blaring at me in my face. I'm like, that was a really cool idea. I need to follow through on that. Other times I wake up and be like, I swear I put something down, but I don't remember what it was. And then I'll look at my note at Morgan and it will tell me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's really cool. And it's basically like just looking at the conveyor belt and there's my day, it just goes. Like when I wake up, as soon as I look at my phone, it's not I'm going to procrastinate in bed for the next half an hour. It's this is really cool. I need to research this, or this is really cool. I want to start work on this. And when I'm on my phone in my bed, I'm not scrolling TikTok or looking through random YouTube videos. I'm actually doing research in my bed. It's like, I didn't want to get out of my bed to turn my computer on to start work. I just wanted to work straight away. So sometimes I do my first 2 hours of work laying on my bed on my phone, but I'm working because I'm researching. I'm doing the thing. It just happens to be in my bed because I have that ability working at home. However, working in London, I can't do that. So I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I'm going to add this in my calendar because obviously all my notes are in Morgan. Well, all of my task notes are in Morgan. I just add it to my calendar. And then when I'm on the train, I can then organize it. So I'm immediately going with the things to do and it just keeps going.
Cool.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. When it comes to the decisions of podcasts and music.
This one I'm really fascinated by.
Yeah. I clip lots of podcasts. So I have a task at the beginning of every day. It's a habit task to go through new podcasts. And if something looks interesting, I push the plus button. I use Spotify and it saves to my episodes list. When I actually go to listen to a podcast, it's got to be related to something I'm interested in at the time because I'm doing like 100+ research projects. So I got podcasts about most things. So it's got to be something related to something I'm doing at the time. However, it can't be directly related to what I'm doing at work or in the next hour or so. Because the way I see it is now I'm already organizing that environment. So when I go into the physical environment, mentally, I'm still very similar, which can negatively impact the new environment that I'm working in because it's already impacted. So it means I need to take some sort of brain break between the podcast and the work so I can reset the environment essentially that I'm working in. And I didn't like that. I just wanted to keep going. So I deliberately choose not to listen to a podcast that I know I'm going to be working on. So for example, the work that I'm doing at the moment is around one topic. I will not listen to a podcast around that topic on the train. So I'll listen to a podcast around coaching or teaching or learning or philosophy or psychology, something else, which means like in the morning, I'll do one thing. Then on the train and the podcast, I'll do another thing. Then at work, I'll do another thing. Then on the train or the podcast on the way back, it may be related to something that came to mind during work. So that's something else. So I'm working on like 6-7 projects at once.
So a lot of what gets said on the internets about this is that what you're doing is actually the wrong way and you'll get overwhelmed. But because of how you've structured and kind of let the environment guide you versus like, oh, I have to do this, then this, then this, then this, then it's very much just like kind of easily emerging with a few constraints that you've added in. It's like, oh, I assume what's happened is you've tried, as you're learning kind of this new process, you've tried to do, you've listened to a podcast that's related to work, and then you've got into work and things are disrupted. You're not quite as productive, and you're not productive, not as productive as you could have been, and you noticed that and made very quick adjustments to go, okay, cool. So this was the environment I was in. That you got immediate feedback of like, oh, okay, this is not working. I am not as organized as I want to be, or this is not the environment I want to be in. And then you've made adjustments to tweak.
So I tried to avoid using too many jargon terms when I was explaining that. The way I would explain it is using attenuation and metastable attenuation, i.e. focus. It's not quite focus, it's a little bit more than that. The way I would describe this is I'm looking at a spot on the wall and everything else is kind of like blurred out, right? When I'm working, I'm looking at the spot. If I then go into another environment, I now need to look at another spot, but I need to unfocus from the spot and refocus to another spot. And that process takes time, takes effort, energy, whatever words you want to put there. And that sort of refocusing or reattunement of the information in the environment is what I do with music. That's what I use the music for, because it completely takes me out of whatever's going on and zones me straight back in. If the things are tight enough aligned, i.e. the work thing is tightly enough aligned with the podcast that I'm listening to, then I don't need to take a break and I can listen to it. But that comes with me understanding the work environment that I'm in, but I can't do that unless I'm in it. I can't predict it. So it's not something I can rule, govern, and say, these are the rules or these are the guidelines for this, that, and the other. It has to be a feeling. Like sometimes I will know, I will feel, yeah, this podcast is going to relate to work later. I'm going to carry on listening to this. Or this podcast is sort of related. I'll probably have to listen to this another time because I can just see this derailing the work later on. And it's a feeling that I know from experience. And most people will know that feeling as well. It's kind of like a gut feeling of, this is cool, but I don't think it's quite right. And there's no objective way to say, this is it. It's just a feeling that you'll know.
It's a gut instinct. So how do you were saying, like, so you start listening to something, how do you deal with that kind of, do you experience that FOMO of like, oh, I really want to listen to that, but I can't right now? Because that's something that I've had in the past of like, oh, I've started and it's taken me a little while to realize that actually, yeah, this is great and all, but it's not what I need right now. How do you, and do you experience that kind of like, you started, so you finished, kind of, how do you, are you literally just like, nope, it's not working, cool, I've listened to this for half an hour, I got what I needed, goodbye?
Moving back to time, finished. When is it finished?
Never.
Exactly. So when in my head, when I look at an article, a podcast, a video, whatever, I've never finished it because I'll always go back to it if it's interesting. If it's good enough, I will go back to it. It's the same with a book. Like, you don't, just because you started reading the book doesn't mean you have to finish reading the book in that month. You could read chapter 1, then chapter 7, and chapter 3, and then 6 over the span of 3 years. And you haven't finished the book, but you have for the project you were working on at that time, or the multiple projects you're working on. And when you look at a lot of authors, they'll reread books. So did they finish the book once and then they need to restart it? Well, they didn't restart it. They just didn't finish it.
Mm.
So I don't see myself as missing out on things.
Because it's never done.
Exactly. It's just in the future at some point. And it's not until I prioritize, I attune my attention, my focus down that route, and it is a part of the system that's created in the environment I'm working in. If it's not there, then I don't need it.
So that was a good question. I was just about to say, do you ever worry that you'll miss things? Or is
No.
it the case is it's there? It's there when I need it, so it will appear when I need it, and that's that.
Again, I think this is another thing that in my head it's not a thing that I would say. I'm not missing out on anything, and there's nothing new to the world. Like it's already been said, it's already been done some way. It's just I have not become, what word do I want to use here? Uh, I'm not familiar enough with it. I'm not aware enough of it for it to impact the decisions I make. But just because I'm not aware of it doesn't mean that I should miss it
Mm.
or want to know it or need to know it or should know it. It's just not organized enough for me at the moment for it to take part in the system that I'm in. And that to me is a good thing.
Okay.
I don't want everything that could potentially be related in a system, because now you're going to be overwhelmed, because self-organizing that many parts is extremely challenging, taxing, and entropy is very likely to happen because it takes so much energy to keep it all together. So I don't want all of that. I would much rather not know. Which is why when
Mm.
people say, "Oh, I'm going to miss out," or "I'm not going to know this," or "I might not understand this," or "Maybe I'll forget this," I'm like, "Good, like, good." You don't want everything in your head all at once, because you can't understand everything at once because it's too complex for the brain to handle.
That's so interesting. So for my experience, it's not the case that I find the concept of things just not being there really foreign to me, because I take in all of the signals in my head. I don't have a this is slightly closer or further away. I'm not sure. I don't think that's what you're saying, but that's the best way I can explain it. Like every single thing that I have in my head, any input, output, whatever it may be, is always kind of on for me in my own head. And so
On a poke, is it on, or are you just aware that it's there?
how
The
do
way,
you define them differently?
the way I would imagine this, putting like an image on this, is you're in a room, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're in your house, you close your eyes, you know where everything is,
Yeah.
right? So you're aware that everything is there. It's not
Hmm.
until you've looked at something that you know that's exactly where it is, because
Mm.
someone may have moved it, or it may have changed in some way. And in your head, you're aware of what's in your head, right? But you don't know exactly how or where or what the impact that thing has on what you're thinking until you actually think about it, i.e., it's become attuned in your focus for you to sort of turn the light on, as it were. So
Mm.
when you say things are on, is that everything is on at once and you're thinking about everything all the time at once with all the interpretations of it? Or are you just aware that there are other things that whatever you're focused on could be related to?
It does vary, obviously, but depending on the environment I am in, there is often more things on than that I am aware of. So if we separate the two, I often have a lot more things on than I am aware, and I have things that I'm aware of but aren't really in the focus of what I do. But I do have a lot of I am trying to take in and process and get all of the different nuances at the same time of multiple things.
When you say more things on, are
Mm.
you thinking about prices of clothing? Are you
Okay, no.
think?
not prices of clothing.
But what I'm
all
saying
of
is
the
prices of
yeah.
clothing is one example, but
Mm.
every element of your knowledge, your experience, your understanding are things that you could relate to. So that's things to do with clothing, houses, buildings, people, relationships, relationship pasts, work, school. Everything that you've experienced is something that you could relate to. And when you
Yes.
said more, there's more things on. I'm like, how in the world can you think of however many years old you are, however many memories that you may have?
Oh, I don't remember how old I.
but but all of the things that you had, that you've done, that you've experienced are things you can attach to. And
Mm.
when you said there's more that's on, is that true?
It feels. I am specifically thinking about what is around me right now. So there are things that are off, but there are things that can very easily turn other things on. So I see something that turns like 5 or 6 other things on. But the other things that were already on before previously that I was thinking of, they just join what I've just turned on from what I've looked at. If that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So I don't. It doesn't appear as I go through the day, more things turn on, and then more things turn on, and then more things turn on, and then more things turn on, but nothing really turns off.
See, I would challenge that. I think things do turn off because when you're focused on something and you're looking at it, you've got a lot of things going on in your head. If you then go somewhere else and you do that thing,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to come back, you're not in the exact same environment. You're not organized in the same way. You don't have the same threads going on. You don't have the same ideas that's happening. So some things have turned off. You could argue you have forgotten them, or you've misplaced them, or you don't know where you were. So some things have turned off because you're not in the exact same place you were. Yes, there are still things turned on, but not as much as they were. And
Mm.
that to me again is when you go through time, that's where you've attuned your focus. And that is where the expertise, so your ability to attune focus easier because of your developed experience over time has increased. So now when you look at it, instead of it being like a small light bulb, it's a bigger light bulb because you've got experience, so you can go in quicker, easier at the moment because through the time it's still there. So during the day, if it may feel like you've got lots of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just because there's a big light bulb like from the past at the moment that hasn't had enough time to entropy back into the environment. We're talking systems here again. So you've got a
Yeah.
system that's the light bulb, and it takes time, effort, energy to keep it together. And during the day, you're keeping everything together. That's the energy that you're expending. When you go to sleep, you don't spend all the energy doing that. So all those systems entropy back into the environment as it were. But when you bring it back together, because you've self-organized it before, expertise, it comes back together quicker. That's in my head what learning is.
Mm.
So I would say things do turn off, but you're still using some energy to keep the things that you've done during the day together. Because you can't just be like, I'm going to forget that, and then your brain just completely forget it. It doesn't happen that way. It takes time for you to forget something because that's how the body works.
Yeah. No. That. Yeah. Mm. Cool.
I like this stuff. This,
Yeah. Me too.
these are the sorts of things I think about. And I'm like, this is cool. How do I explain this to people?
Yeah. No. I like that. That's given me, and perhaps we'll check in next week about it because I'll think about that this week and pay more attention or attune to it a little bit more.
Yeah. Be more aware of what's going on. And these are the
I,
sorts of things that happen in my head. I'm like, how do I explain this thing to other people? This is the way that I work. And this is
yeah. I like
the
this. This is
language I
really
speak.
it makes my head make sense to me.
Right.
So I
I
like
need to
it.
put this in a book.
You really do. Hurry up. And millions.
Yeah, I'm not fussed about the money, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Right, let's actually get to this tweet, which I think is actually kind of related to what we were talking about. You can get a lot of attention or impress people who regularly read academic papers. You need to pick one. And that was a response from Thomas Frank to my tweet that I said, so I was retweeting what someone else had said. They said, if you want to make money online, here are 8 tools you can't miss. And then listed 8 tools. And I said, can't miss. I don't use any of them and earn enough to live off. Sharing advice is great, but why the need to add sensationalistic marketing to things? Like that was my question, and Thomas Frank responded with, get a lot of attention or impress people who regularly read academic papers. What are your initial thoughts? Lovely. Silence. Great. Love it.
No, it's not silence. It's more, how do I approach this conversation delicately?
I would rephrase that. Why delicately?
No.
We're blunt. We are blunt.
Yeah, good point.
British people.
It's annoying. It's such a irritating way of thinking. It's so binary, and it's like, why do we have to choose? Why do we have to choose?
I agree.
It's like either we be marketers or we don't. Well, marketing is just a conversation. And it doesn't have to be a sensationalist conversation. Right now, both me and Danny are marketing because we're having a conversation. We're marketing our ideas to each other and our thoughts and opinions and all of that stuff. That's what we're doing.
And to everyone else listening, of course.
Huh?
And to everyone else listening or watching, of course.
And to all of you listening, we're marketing our expertise, idiocy. We're marketing who we are.
I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm all making it up,
But who isn't?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the cool. And like it's like and this is the opinion of the internet of like either you market and sensationalize or you fail. And you only talk to little niche people. And I'm like, right, why? Like that's my instinct. Why do we have to choose? Something that I saw, which I found really interesting, and I don't have the exact person who tweeted this. They were talking about like AI tools and stuff. And a lot of the AI stuff is still based around marketing, but marketing the same tactics that have been around. It's marketing from the standpoint of sensationalism. And this person was saying that it will mean the death of that because now anyone can do it and they don't even need to try. They don't need to even put in effort because it's that easy to do now. Because you just give it all of the templates and the tools and the AI will do it for you. So everyone's going to be speaking like that. Everyone's going to be talking in that way, in that sensationalist way. And so it's going to kill it because people are like, that's AI. That's AI. I got a pitch email for this podcast, in fact, which was absolutely hilarious. Really? I got a pitch email for this podcast. Yes. And it read like AI. And I'm like, one, even if you did know what we did, you'd know we don't take guests. Not really. Two, you're using weird, odd language that nobody says. And you're over exaggerating everything. This person's written a book or something. I don't even remember. It was that boring. It's like, no, I can tell that's AI. And actually put it into originality.ai. I put it into there because that's kind of the most accurate that I've found so far. And it noted all of the AI bits. Yeah. And I'm like, no.
See, those are the sorts of people that I love to question.
I do.
I was saying this to my sister the other day. Like, there are lots of people that say things, and I'm like, it sounds harsh, but I want to pick an argument with them. Not because I want to trigger emotional reactions. That's what I feel a lot of people think about when I say argument. They think, oh, you're going to emotionally trigger them and cause a fight. No. Argument is in, I want to share my point of view with evidence and see if they have an evidence base for their point of view. And most of the time when I do this, the other person just gets triggered. They just get emotionally triggered. They then get defensive, and oftentimes they then like fire personal shots and insults. And I'm sitting there like, is that what you got? Is that all you've got? Okay, really good. And it sounds really nasty, but it's just so fun because you, one, show that you know what you're talking about because the other person doesn't have a response, or they do have a response and then you get a beneficial conversation.
Yeah.
I
And that's the
rarely
thing
get
that
those
I
though.
find so strange with that. It's like, I don't want to choose. Why do I have to? And I
Mm.
really like the take of like, instead of using AI just to generate these pieces of content using the content things that everybody tells you to use, you can use it to get a starting point and then use your own humanness in it. Because AI can do all the stupid marketing stuff for you, but it cannot do the human stuff. It even at GPT-4, it cannot be a human. Coming remarkably close and doing very well with many things, but it still cannot be a human and make the same connections that you can. And I'm not sure it ever will, because it is not what it is being made out to be. It is basically a glorified autocomplete. Oversimplifying, obviously, for the sake of simplicity, but like it is just autocomplete with a little bit of fancy stuff added in. And without the human interaction, it still will not achieve what we want. It's like there will be jobs going, and there was a paper, and I was just like, everyone's talking about how jobs will be lost, and this will be that. It will require people to be more creative, to think beyond the, oh, I just have to put these particular words in this particular order to psychologically manipulate someone into doing what I want. And it'll mean that people will have to start, I don't know, communicating.
What's that?
I don't know,
It's
having
that thing
actual
you do with
discussion.
you do that with a hole in your face, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And it's where people can actually communicate and have conversations and do different things. It's so much more interesting.
I think when it comes to this tweet, what I find irritating is the oversimplification of both of those choices. Because get a lot of attention. By attention, I assume he's referring to numbers and popularity, i.e., vanity metrics. In which case, lots of attention could be 10,000 people in a small community, 100,000 people in a medium-sized community, 1 million people in a big community. So get a lot of attention doesn't really have any weight behind the point because it depends what community you're talking about. And then when you look at the second point, impress people who regularly read academic papers. That is anyone that is learning about a topic. They will read information from academic papers regularly, unless you're in journalism, in which case you're reading journalists, and that's a completely different thing. Especially when we're talking about what I would argue this is about is building a business. And building a business, you can't just read a journalist a newspaper about that. You have to go and figure out how people have done it. And an academic paper, okay, you could argue an academic paper needs to go through publications, blah, blah, blah. But I think the general consensus of this point isn't academic papers specifically, but I think it's the jargon-filled, research-backed, evidence-based conversations people are having, which is like the broccoli content. That sort of stuff you can still get attention with, especially, I mean, my response, especially when you look at the video essayists. Because I responded, why choose one? Plenty of video essay channels get lots of attention and read academic papers. And there are loads of them. They're doing videos of like 40 plus minutes long. They're mini documentaries, video essays, long podcast episodes where people read academic papers and then they talk about the research they're going through. And I mean, to put it bluntly, most books that have any value to them come from academic research. And I would argue most writers have a lot of attention if they found success. I mean, Ryan Holiday, Malcolm Gladwell, Seth Godin, written books. What do they read? Academic work. Yeah. And to me, it's an oversimplification of two categories, two choices, neither of which are a one or the other. And I guess I get that this is Twitter, But still, I think it was a very short-sighted tweet. I mean, maybe he takes it back and there is probably context and thinking behind the tweet. But as a profile, I would worry about saying something like that. Like in my head, I'm trying to ask myself, would I say something like that? And I don't see myself doing it. Maybe I've done it in the past. Maybe I'll do it in the future. But it just doesn't sound like something I would want to say. And that, I think, again, cycling back round to the perspective that you have on the world, the way you look at things, the philosophy that you have, that, again, is a very input, process, output look. It's a very information processing style of view, like philosophy of practice. It's not in cognitive psychology, but I think it's built from this idea that that's how the world works with marketing.
And also a lot of the business psychology is based on cognitive, like that, like area, that field of information processing, input, process, output, which in fact we are simplifying anyway. But that is pretty much what it's based on.
I mean, he's literally saying, like, get a lot of attention as the output of the sensationalistic marketing. But is the output, like, real? Like, just because you've got the attention from the sensationalistic marketing, the process of doing that is fairly short, obviously. But is the output actually what you wanted? Because a lot of people
goes back to something that I tweeted about the other day with the DM me for this or do this. Like, I've got a new product here, DM me and say reply with X thing, and I'll send it to you for free. And my reaction to that from a business perspective was, how is that beneficial? You'll get followers, but how do those followers do anything? Like, how do those followers help you? Now, obviously, having a larger following allows you to reach, has the opportunity to get you out there more and have a bit of clout and a bit of oomph in the businessy world, in the marketing world, because people see big numbers means you know what you're talking about.
Same with PhD letters or the doctor. Just because you've got a DR before your name doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. Right. It's one of the most annoying things about social media is the initial perception you get of someone. So I've spoken about that before. I don't know whether we've spoken about my accountant experience on the podcast.
Oh, we have. That was such a good experience. 2 podcasts back.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, for
3
those
when you're listening to this.
I was going to say, for those that are unfamiliar, long story short, I went into a few accountants locally to me, and they immediately judged the way I looked and were like, "Why are you here? What do you need to be here for?" Then they find out how much I earn, and then they go, "Oh, yeah, we'll help you." Judge a book by its cover much. But yeah,
did you actually let them help you?
Oh no, I didn't give them my money at all. No. I am debating about going back to them and just speaking to them and saying, "Sorry, I decided to go with someone else that respects my time." But I don't know whether I want to be that petty. But yeah, it's one of those things where the marketing, I understand it. I get the value, I get the face, like people judging from the face, but before you actually do anything or act on anything, just step back and critically analyze. And I would argue to do the same thing for me. Like, just because I sound like I know what I'm talking about, don't believe it. Actually look at it for yourself. Go into the research, go in to try and find stuff that makes sense to you. Granted, it's very difficult with the stuff I'm talking about because I'm talking about things that are very complicated and abstract at the moment. So it will take a lot of time and effort. So take it with a pinch of salt, I guess. But don't take things at face value. And I think most people listening will agree, or probably even know that. But it's a nice reminder to have, especially when you get big profiles. Because I've fallen in the trap in the past that just, oh yeah, that must be right because that big person said it.
Yeah, I think we all have fallen in that trap.
Yeah,
because there isn't a right answer. the only right answer that exists is the answer that you're happy with. That is the right answer, which can always change.
Yeah, I think a right answer needs to have boundaries put in place for there to be a result there, which again adds in constraints in the environment, which is one of the reasons ecological dynamics is almost impossible to prove, because inherently by adding constraints you're changing the environment.
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to discuss before we close this one out is YouTubers as a business, because previously in this podcast you've been the business person and I've been the other. I don't really have a category. Oh, science geek, thanks.
Nerd.
Yes.
Nerd.
Yes, that's a compliment. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I'm at a point now where I think I'm happy to argue with someone that being a YouTuber is being a business owner. Previously, I wasn't. Previously, I would say they're a content creator, and there were different dynamics around that. But the more you look at the industry, the more you look at the direction of the industry, you more look at what's happening in the industry and where it's going. And I'm thinking about plagiarism. I'm thinking about marketing. I'm thinking about all of the elements of the creator industry and how it's replicating the business industry. And it's essentially part of business now.
Yeah.
I don't think you can argue that a content creator isn't a business owner. The bit that I'm still questioning is where their transition is from I don't even know what you call it, like a beginner to a business owner. Because obviously when people start their business, they're starting their business, and that's what you'd call it. They're starting their business. When people start their YouTube channel, most people wouldn't say, oh yeah, they're starting their business. But you could argue that they are. And
I think it's very dependent on the context of which you go into it. Well, obviously, but like, it really does depend, because if you already have a business, let's say, for example, I already have a business, which has been a bit wound down for now, but whatever. If I was to start a YouTube channel, would that be a second business, or would that be an extension of my business? And I think you need to know the context around it.
And that right there is where I kind of got this conversation from, because Jazza, one of the many creators I watch on YouTube, was discussing in, I think, his third channel, his vlog channel. I think it's the third one. Well, I say his third one, his 9th channel. But his personally, like his third one, the one that he actually does stuff on. He was discussing his businesses, and he treated each YouTube channel as a business, because each YouTube channel is its own business. It has content that it creates, money that it comes in, products that it can create. So each YouTube channel is a business.
Yeah.
And when I expand that out, I sit there and go, okay, so is a platform a business? And I think you could argue, yes, a platform is a business. And when I step back again and I look at Ali's team, Ali Abdol's team, we did a video recently, a half-hour video about his team. Mm-hmm. He is a CEO of multiple businesses, because he's got the course, and then he's got the different social media platforms, and he has people that help him with one business, but he has smaller businesses underneath the brand that is Ali. So the people that help him with TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 posts, I would say they help run a business. Whereas the editor doesn't help run a business. The editor helps one business function. Does that make sense?
Kind of almost like an operations person. The editor is the operations manager, because the editor kind of gets things all together. I mean, that's simplifying a little bit, but...
But I think that's where you've got the company of Ali, and then you've got the businesses of YouTube, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And when I look at YouTube channels like that, and there are millions of YouTube channels that earn money, that are a business, but you don't. A lot of people don't see them as a business yet. When you go to an accountant's and you say, "Oh, I'm self-employed, I'm a business," "Oh, what do you do?" "I make videos." "What?" They don't get it. But it is a business. Finding help for those outside the creator industry, you won't recognize this. Trying to find help with finances as a content creator is extremely difficult because most banks don't have a clue what you're talking about. Most financial advisors are completely lost and, and they don't know what's going on. And you need to find someone that is willing to learn the industry with you and look into things. So a perfect example, recently I got the USA tax, what's it called? The tax invoice thing from the USA. Foreign persons US source income subject to withholding, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, the W1012
42S thing. Yeah, that one. Because YouTube AdSense gives me money from America and I need the foot. I went to Santander, local place of banking. They were like, "Yeah, I don't know." Like they didn't know what to do about it because it's, well, as the financial advisors, because it's not their job. Their job is to help people financially in the UK, not with outside. And I was like, "Okay, well, can you give me help?" And they were like, "Well, that's not part of our job. That would be personalized." What was it? It was private. Sorry, it's private advice rather than it being like banking advice, because I'm not with that bank. I'm like, and all the banks said the same, like Nationwide, NatWest, they're all saying the same. Yorkshire, these are all UK banks and societies and things, but they're all saying the same sort of thing. Like, unless we're giving you advice about our specific bank, we can't help you. And I'm like, but my business is in multiple banks and it comes from different sources. And yeah, like when I say I have income sources, they're like, "What do you mean income sources?" I'm like, well, I don't just sell consulting. I don't just sell a product. I have all these things. And like, right, okay. And it's a frigging business. You should be able to help me with this. But yeah, they don't. I'm with an accountant that's one of like, it's one of those sort of family business sort of things, that local family business, they sort of hidden away, but they're like a hidden gem sort of place. Found them on Google. Well, my dad found them on Google. I would have used Bing as like 5th suggestion. He's laughing. Yeah, it would have been like the 5th suggestion down, because the top ones are obviously the main businesses, blah blah blah. But when I spoke to her, she, like I said, she didn't care about what it looked like. She didn't care about the money. She just wanted to help. And she's troubleshooting the stuff with me, learning finance stuff as well. Obviously, she understands finances way better than I do because she is an accountant. But I'm like, it's a business. Why not treat it like a business?
Yeah.
And John's just nodding his head agreeing.
Oh yeah, I have no arguments at all. I think it should be treated as a business. It's interesting because as you're speaking, I'm like, in terms of how I've thought of my YouTube channel, it was never as a business. It was just a place where I put videos. But actually, it is a business. It could be a piece of my business. And I think also, like, one of the
Piece of your company.
Piece of my company, yes, thank you. Yeah. A piece of my company.
That's what I mean. It doesn't feel natural to say it.
Yeah, but it is a piece of my company. And so some of the things that I've been thinking about a lot as things are emerging in what's going on with my life and business and all of that stuff and company, let's call it a company. It's like, okay, cool. So if I am to approach my business, instead of an information processing, comes in, things come out. If I was to approach my business in the way of dynamical systems, complexity theory, all of those lovely, yummy things that I research, Ed.
Got a lot of Ed.
This might be relevant, but what is that? do I start with ecological dynamics or do I start with complexity theory? Because that's the thing that I'm like, I wish to use the best language, best, the most accurate language to match what I do, but they're all kind of intermingling together.
Ecological dynamics is the highest level that's
Yeah.
the most encompassing of the topics, theories, and philosophies.
Yeah.
So that's the way I would look at it. Ecological psychology on its own is fine, but applying dynamical systems theory to ecological psychology requires dynamical systems theory, of course,
Yeah.
which is ecological dynamics.
Yeah.
If you say complexity theory and then use ideas from ecological psychology, you're now talking about two different areas, which comes under the banner of ecological dynamics.
Yeah, because that was the thing that as I've been working on this piece that I'm writing, I'm like, oh, it's sort of the complexity. Yeah, no, yes, maybe. And I could see that there I was trying to figure out the marketing of it, basically, is what I'm thinking of. It's the marketing of it, which is what is the word I use.
Talk about marketing. Actually, carry on with your sentence wherever you were.
So yeah, that I was just what was I saying? As I've been thinking of implementing ecological dynamics into what I'm doing in my business, it is brought up all of these like assumptions that I've made about business. And it's really fascinating of like, oh, you must have this thing or that thing or this thing in place. And YouTube is just for this reason. And YouTube has been something that I've avoided because it's just content, which I found, which as we've been talking today, I'm like, interesting.
But the
But it's
thing is
not
that
just content.
that's why it's so difficult for you to start, because it is a business.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's and I'm now like, yeah, that's exactly the point. I'm like, oh, it's actually a business I'm starting. I'm actually starting a business, another one. Am I insane? Which is because as part of what I've been thinking about, I have very much been quite like binary in my thinking up until recently around what I do, which doesn't actually match with the way I am. Like, if I look at myself and the way that I work, I am, except as everybody else is, I'm incredibly multifaceted and I'm aware of how many things I do. I'm not just a coach, I'm not just a consultant, I'm not just a Notion consultant, I'm not just an Obsidian person. I am way more than that.
Consultant person.
Yeah, I am. I have so many things that I can help with, and trying to define that in information processing way, which is how I've approached it recently, up until recently, is like I just put it under the banner of simplicity specialist because that is the marketing term that I use to cover everything that I do. But as I've been exploring more and living the things that I've said, which we discussed that last week's episode, it's become more apparent on where things are, like how I can adjust things to actually be more dynamic, because that's what I need and want to do in my business. I work better in a dynamic environment. So instead of just, oh, you need to focus your attention and only work on one project at a time, or I only need to do this at a time or that at a time, provided I am earning revenue, which obviously is a very key part of a business, which is the thing that I'm working on right now after winding down and I'm winding back up again now, is where will the revenue come from? Well, there are like 12 different ways it can come from. And automatically it's like, you choose one and you should only choose one.
Because that's your niche and that's where you focus.
Yeah. And I'm like, but why? I could work on 12. And I watched your video on CGP Grey and I'm like, yes, that could be an Obsidian. Oh, all these products connecting together in a dynamical system in Obsidian on a canvas. Oh, so that's something that I'm working on now, of like actually creating and like just putting all that's here out of my head into one place, just so I can start playing with it and seeing what emerges.
It's so I'm curious. What are your thoughts on those, like the last two videos I've done? Because they've been very much I'm just going to sit and talk to a camera about some thoughts.
Oh, I liked it. I like to sit at the camera and talk about thoughts.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, what I was going to say is when you look at the businesses that are successful, whether they know it or not, they've built an environment around themselves because they have a blog where they're talking about the
Marie,
things. Yeah,
Marie, Marie's a
exactly.
fantastic example of that.
They
And
built a
as
blog around
she's
the things
learned,
that.
and as she's learned more about how she works, she's adapted it and put it into her stuff that she does
Yeah,
and talks about it more. And so she's recently been diagnosed with ADHD. So she's following that and talking about her experience with ADHD and Notion because she loves Notion and she loves ADHD. I remember right at the beginning when she first discovered Notion, she was like, I am all in there.
yep.
Even though she had like goodness knows how many years of experience doing like instructional design and all of the other things that she used to do.
Yeah, and like she's a good example of how she's used the environment she was in, i.e., the Twitter, the Facebook, the Notion community, just in general. She's used that, and the organization inside of that environment built the system, which is the course. And the course develops with different parts as the environment shifts and changes through the dynamics. And her business is an environment. Well, it isn't a system in the environment and a company. Yeah, the way I see her YouTube channel, apologies, Marie, if you're listening, is a failed business. Or a paused business, maybe. I
like
say
paused business. I think paused business sounds more.
I think that's because of the perception of what fail means. Fail,
That's true.
because I think fail is a good thing. I think she did something. It did a lot of good things, but it failed in that it didn't follow through on what she potentially wanted it to be or wanted it to do because of the focus elsewhere, i.e., she chose to prioritize the course. I realize I could have said there she didn't have the time to. Relating to something earlier, so I could have said she didn't have the time to do the videos and could have done the course. Yeah, that just don't feel right. She chose to do the course over the channel. So I would say the channel was a failure in that it didn't get to where she envisaged it to be. But it was a success in that it was part of the environment to build what the system is today. And it still builds it because she's still got videos up. It's just a smaller part of the larger system. I love these things.
So good. So fascinating. Was there anything else we were going to talk about?
No. They're the two things plus all the other stuff in between.
It's not our podcast if we don't talk about everything but the topic first.
Exactly. I think the last thing I want to mention is because you brought up about trying to work out how to market a thing, right? I've been playing around with book names for this thing for a while. The learning game that I can't remember her name, who's sort of pre-released. When I look at the learning game as a title, it irritates me. I mean, I understand it. I thought about it and I was like, it irritates me because learning a game, I get that it's directed at teaching. I get that it's directed at education, but I think it undermines what learning is outside of child education, which is, it doesn't sit well with me. But I totally get it. Like I probably would have done something similar, targeting that audience. But it doesn't sit well with me because I think it reduces the importance of adult education. And I would argue adult education is actually not necessarily more important, but it has a wider impact than child education because child education sucks at the moment anyway. But there are less children than there are adults. And when you look at andragogy is from around 16, 17 up. And when you actually look at the majority of people that are making impactful changes to their learning, they're like 13 plus. So I don't think the learning game, I don't know what the book's about, but I don't think the learning game is going to make as much of an impact as it could have done if it was directed at adult education. Because the way I see it is it's going to be focused at the adults teaching their children. But the adults have to learn how to learn themselves before they can teach the children. So it's kind of like the second book in where I would want it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's the adults first, then the kids.
That's how I would see it, because if you've got adults trying to teach kids in a way that they don't learn themselves, then they're doing exactly what we don't want them to do, which is teach something they don't have experience in and they don't have understanding in, because they don't have the expertise in that environment, which is what we already have, which is what she's trying to challenge. She's trying to challenge the people that are teaching things that is poor practice, i.e. don't rote learn. You need to get children to challenge, great, but if the teachers aren't in those environments themselves,
Yeah.
then it's just really hypocritical.
Mm.
So I'm like, okay, how do I explain ecological dynamics? I've gone through loads of titles. The one I'm happy with at the moment is Ecological Learner or Ecological Learners. But yeah, I really like finding a title to a book is hard.
Yep.
Work in progress. And if you're interested, by the way, anyone listening, if you're interested in the stuff I'm going to be writing about, talking about, etc., that's where my channel is moving towards. I am in process of doing blog stuff. I was going to do it on Obsidian, and I decided to do it on WordPress because search results, basically SEO. However, I'm going to keep my notes on Obsidian. So I'm going to, if people are interested in the research that triggered the blog post, I'm going to direct them to Obsidian. So I'm doing it that way.
All your references are going to be in the Obsidian document versus on the blog. And the blog will just reference Obsidian.
Yes and no. I treat Obsidian as a research file. So yes, the references will be there, but it doesn't necessarily mean I've used the reference in the blog.
Yes, that's what I mean. Like on the blog itself, your reference kind of points will be an Obsidian.
Well, I probably won't put the reference in the blog because the blog will be my voice. It will be my opinion, my statements, and you can't really reference your point of view from a thing that's that broad, unless it's a quote or something like that. So I won't bother referencing. It will be my voice, me speaking, me potentially expressing stories. So far less of an academic writing, but it's still having research behind it. So it's researched, it's a formulated opinion. It's researched writing rather than opinionated. Well, not because it is opinionated, but not the poor opinionations that are shared where there's no evidence. Yeah, so that's the plan. Work in progress. But yeah, I'm doing lots of things at once.
Yay.
No, hopefully you enjoyed. I'm going to have to bring up Discord so I can close down Discord so I can actually stop the recording on Zoom because I love my computer. Right. Speak to you all next week.
Bye.